And we're going, and welcome again, everyone. It's great to see you. It is August 18th, 2023, and this is our Perfect Connections meeting. So let's go around, and if we could just say who you are, and so I'll start with myself, and then I'm going to call somebody, and then you can call on the next person. I'm Susan Walker, formerly with the University of Minnesota, and now with myself and the world and whatever I goddamn well want to do. So I will turn it over to Sarah Alcock.
Okay. And as she said, I'm Sarah Alcock. I'm PE with the Burnsville-Egan Savage District. I'm not sure I can talk about boundaries, Susan, because I just agreed to do another class this year. But one thing I would really like to get input from everyone about is how do you expand the word about a specialty class you're doing? I am teaching a class using reflective dialogue. I've trained with Heather extensively on this, and I know it's not for everybody, but I haven't had anybody sign up for it yet. And I know that there are not a ton of people, in my area who have trained and are ready to do reflective dialogue classes. And so I'd like to get the word to other districts, but I don't know if, we can't promote a class from a different district. I don't know how that works. Oh, Susan, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks, Sarah. I was just saying, I put the note in chat so we have that and we can come back to it. Welcome, Nancy. We're just going, Sarah?
I was going to say, I'm going to go to UG.
Oh,
hey,
and before you do that, UG, I just want to welcome Nancy and just let her know that we are going around with introductions and sharing what we might want to talk about. Okay? So
welcome, Nancy.
Thanks,
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, my name is Yuji, and I actually I am from Minnesota. I graduated in Minnesota. I got state license. I just renewed my license. That is a very good thing. And also I part-time worked for ECFE St. Paul while I was in school. So now currently I'm living in Whitefish, and I have been developing and teaching, virtual parenting class here. But since February, I took a new position. I work remotely for a nonprofit Family Kind in New York, and so for the parenting education department. So right now we are developing and launching a program in New York, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to bring this ECFE-like model, and to another state. So that is what I'm doing. And regarding to your topic today, Susan, and gosh, this is the biggest topic to me right now. I have been thinking of this for 2 weeks. So yeah, I look forward to our discussion. So I will call Sarah. Yeah. So I know your last name is, but I will just call you.
Hi, Yuji. Hi.
Hey.
Fritch, Sarah Fritch, Big Lake, early childhood is me. Teach parent ed, early childhood coordinator. I love. Let's talk about boundaries. That's my goal this year, is to maybe, I don't know, develop some. Nancy, go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Nancy Trahey, and I am a licensed parent educator for Albany Area Schools, which is a smaller rural district. And I'm not sure that I have a specific question for today. I do want to thank Yuji for, since I'm seeing you, for the huckleberry yummy stuff that we had at our retreat. I was lucky enough to win a rock, paper, scissors and took home part of a jar. And I hung on to the jar. I said to my husband, I need to figure out how to order more of this because it was so yummy. So thank you, Yuji.
Yeah, it's my honor. Thank you so much.
And now, I don't know who hasn't gone, but the
Mary.
raise of hand.
Mary Kay.
Mary Kay, your turn.
Thanks, Nancy. I'm Mary Kay Ashley. I am employed by Burnsville Egan Savage School District as a parent educator and have been for about 35 years in two pieces. When Governor, not Walz, when Governor Pawlenty gutted the early childhood funding, I was laid off along with 3 others on our staff. And the moment a parent educator retired about 3 years ago, about 3 years after that, I applied for her job and came back. So it's been good. Boundaries are an interesting thing for me because, as you might have heard some of what I was talking about, I was just offered an additional position, part-time, interim, short-term, and I turned it down. And I'm really proud of myself. But there's a lot of my colleagues who already think I'm crazy for what I do. And I think some simply don't approve, Sarah excluded. I mean, that's not an issue. But when I started in ECFE, I worked as a youth minister during getting my teaching degree, and then I started in ECFE, and then I started seminary. And I would hear people say, often behind my back, well, she'll quit when she has to do her internship. Well, she'll quit when she has to do CPE. Well, she'll quit when she graduates. Well, she'll quit when she's ordained. And I never did. And I think lots of people think I should have, and I'm not sure how much of that is about having 2 jobs and how much of that is religion and school do not mix. That's not my experience, but it seems to be a pretty rigid boundary for many people. And I'm not suggesting that I'm proselytizing or anything in my classes. I probably work harder than anyone on our staff not to do that, not to mention my churches, except to my colleagues who I think are okay with that. And the joke about having boundaries or starting to have boundaries, the people who have ever asked me to cross one of my boundaries know that I have really solid boundaries. They just don't happen to be where everyone else thinks they should be. So.
Thanks, Mary Kay. As you're talking, I think so often when we talk about boundaries, we think about sort of these tangible boundaries of space and time, right? And like, how can I have more time for this? And even when you were talking about taking another job or not taking another job, all of us immediately start visualizing the number of hours in your week that you would do, like a physical body doing something for, 8 hours a week. And that's fine because it is, right? It's those time boundaries, those space boundaries. A lot of my teaching about technology and about the internet. And as we've been, we're doing this virtually and we're learning virtually and we're teaching virtually is, like how that or work family balance boundaries are taken away by the internet because it's like removing time and space boundaries, right? We're not going to work. We're not, like we're here. Anyway, but even as you're talking, there's another boundary of like topics and content, and what do we talk about and what don't we talk about, And so I'm really glad that you mentioned that as well, because it too just expands our understanding of what we mean when we say boundaries, because somebody else may not have an issue at all, right, with time and place and energies and that sort of thing. But it could be that they're like oversharing and they're or they have a parent who overshares, and that's kind of going into, a boundary. So, yeah, thanks. So what comes up for you guys when we just talk about boundaries? So usually you had an immediate reaction to it. What are some of the issues or the interests or the questions that you have when it comes to the idea of boundaries? And maybe we'll put our own boundary on it and just think about our work in parenting it.
Yeah, thank you, Susan, for giving me this opportunity. And I really appreciate Mary Kay brought up, the boundary, like not talking about religion or something. So I have three things, regarding to boundary. I have three things I would like to discuss. So one is like, the talking about religion, to the group. That is one thing, and another is so like for group sharing, when we have group, right? Some people, they, we discuss this like about calling, like how to motivate, how do we assess the parents learning and motivate their engagement, when some people, they just don't share, they, or some people, they don't want to be called on names, right? So that is another boundary thing. And the last one is about my own, like the work and life. I just feel like I have been working excessively, really too much. I'm burning out. And but I feel like I have this goal, I have this position, I have responsibilities, and we are launching this program. And how can I feel like it's really hard to so that is something I really am thinking. I was thinking this weekend I need to really make a list, what to do, what not to. So these are three aspects of the boundaries I am facing now. I mean, maybe there are more later, but right now in my when you said immediate thoughts. So we had a colleague, right? Because we have been team training, and one of the new parent educators, I eventually just couldn't. I just had to let him go because he constantly talking about his religion, and it's really I mean, I just feel like we just cannot I reminded him in different ways, and several ways, and just didn't work. So that is something. Yeah.
Well, and for that matter, then really the boundary of, besides talking about ourselves, talking about our own religion or our thoughts about religion, about any topic, how much do we talk about our own perspectives or views on any topic that here, it's a fine line to walk, right? Parents want to trust you and know that you're real. And yet, of course, none of us would ever want to sway someone's decision making on a, based on what our view is. Does that make sense? Am I?
Yeah, Nancy, especially because when we working with public schools, I mean, you literally will lose your program. If you don't cope with public school policies, right? And we don't want, I feel like, I don't want to make people think, oh, have belief is a good thing, right? So have belief, that is really foundation of our life. But the thing is, how to balance, like, and as an administration, how do we communicate? How do we help them? So that is a new thing for me to learn.
Yeah, I just put in the chat, as you're talking, is that sometimes, I think the hardest thing with boundaries is when it's up to us to impose them, sort of like Mary Kay's decision around not taking something on. And when we're talking about, like, when we're facilitating conversation or we're training educators or whatever, is in some ways, it doesn't make it easier because we still have to enact it, right? But if there is like a code of conduct or there are certain policies that are already out there, then it makes it's just like, this is something we've agreed to, or if you want to be a parenting educator with this agency, these are our like, this is the way that we operate, right? And because we do work with public schools, infusing our beliefs on religion is something that we're not allowed to do, we're not able to do. And so it's sort of then following rules in a way, but as a community, where whatever the community is, it's kind of up to us to like have those rules. So sometimes it's sort of like good fences make good neighbors, right? So having those policies gives us some kind of limitations, and which is partly why I think almost that boundary of sharing, in a lot of parenting education classes, I know people start with setting group boundaries or group rules, right? And and sort of like as a community, what are the rules we want to abide by? And I've always loved that, and I do it in my classrooms as well, because then it's not us as being like the authority coming up with the rules. This is a shared context.
Yeah, like during the team training, some of especially one of the team members not comfortable herself, is not comfortable to be called, like name calling. So they have this kind of thought, like, so they are not they don't want to call the parents the name in the group. And then and on the other hand, we do need to assess the learning, right? We do need to know their understanding and if this is beneficial, and so what are other strategies we can approach to assess their learning, these parents learning. And also I feel like if there's someone never talked in the group, and what is that influence to the group, right? So yeah, those are the question like we talked about.
I want to share two things about boundaries here that came to mind while we were talking. One, I think having those boundaries is so very important but I mean, we all know that, but it can be, how do I put it? I will admit that it can be very daunting to be the person to say, I'm sorry, this is not something that is appropriate for our discussion today. Either in our group norms, we've talked about not doing this. It's a public school system. This is, any of those things. It's still hard to be the person to say, I'm sorry, I need to cut you off here. I had an experience where a woman was trying to join my chapter of this women's organization I belong to, PEO, and she kept trying, in her introductions, she kept trying to sell her makeup. She was a Mary Kay representative, and we had to say, I mean, she was told many times, no, this is not a networking thing. We have other goals. And she, for the first time I've ever known of, she was not asked to transfer into our chapter because she could not follow that. But the other thing that came to my mind, and I've actually thought about this before, when I try talking about discipline with families, and we're just getting started in that discussion and talking about how discipline does not mean punishment. It actually means learning. And I try, it's like, okay, I say this and I recognize fully that if Mary Kay said this in a class, somebody would jump all over her but I say, if you think about the disciples, they were learning from this man named Jesus. Whether you believe what he taught is another matter, but they were learning. That's what discipline means. And it has been effective for me to get that, use that to get that across, but I am very aware that it would be a very different matter for Mary Kay.
Mhm.
I think
So-
that, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Eugene.
So I want to say thank you to Sarah. I really appreciate you brought up this, person trying to sell something. I think I need to add that to the group, the broad rules. Thank you. I wrote down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Thank
think,
you, Susan.
Sarah, you're also even bringing up sort of the boundaries in the way we teach, like in the words that we use to teach, right? And so when you're talking about, so you're you're bringing that up is from your reference, right? A sort of a Christian reference of Jesus and the disciples, that for some people in some settings just needs explanation, right? Or is not necessarily their belief. So it may or may not go for them, right? And so what I've always found is sometimes it's almost like it's almost like a speed limit, where it's like the speed limit is 35 and you're figuring and everybody else is driving 40 and then you're driving 42, and it's just like, and it's, you hit that 42 mark and that's when the cop shows up. And so it's like, it's all fine because you're kind of bending. Well, there aren't any rules. I mean, here there is like a speed limit rule, but it's just like, you keep that in mind, right? You want to be, ethical and cool and be relative and, in our teaching and stuff like that. And you're all good until you get that one parent, right? Who, when you say Jesus and the disciples, sort of pulls back, gives you, like the side eye, of like, hold on, like that doesn't work for me, but that's how we learn, right? And so I think sometimes just thinking of these principles about boundaries and learning, and I think it can be the same thing for us too, with other boundaries, like with work and family, or with adding other jobs, or taking that 8-hour position early in our lives that was perfectly fine then. And then, or as usually we're saying, you reach burnout, right? And you go, oh, well, that's like hitting 42 miles an hour and getting nailed by the cops, right? It's just that learning thing. It's just that, I didn't know until I was just kind of doing it out there. And now I've got to kind of, come back closer to driving 35. I got to get a little bit closer to the rules and understand a little bit more what those boundaries are. Yeah.
So Susan, so what can you do, like when I mean, so there's all the responsibility and the work, it just demands that much work, and then you cannot do that much. So what do you do?
Well, let's just open that up to the group, because I would say that's probably something every person here has faced.
Oh,
Yeah. And isn't it kind of wouldn't it be wonderful if we had the magic answer, right? Here's the formula. Here's what you should do. And if only, because I think, Yuji, it so depends upon such an individual thing. What's too much for you? What are those comfortable ways to set those boundaries about how much time, and I think first it starts with giving ourselves those messages, and deciding whatever those boundaries are going to be. Am I going, some of you have shared, maybe not here, but at the retreat or other places, where you said, okay, once it hits this time, then I need to, because I need to walk away from my work life. Your office is at home, right, Yuji?
Yeah, I work
And
remote.
I think that adds to it. It was, my husband's office was at home for a long time, for a while when we were in Wisconsin, and that made it more difficult because, and that was pre-cell phones too. So some of the people he worked with considered me his office secretary, and they would ask me questions like, well, when will he be back when I answered the phone? I didn't always know the answer to that question. And unfortunately, I couldn't say, here's his work cell phone number. Please call him and I'm sure he'll be happy to help you. So I had to decide for myself in that case that I was not going to play the role of secretary and that I would be polite and I would take messages just like I would for him at any other time. I mean, I had to decide all these things, right? And then I shared that with my husband because, you know, it was his work. And then he gradually started to share it with, because it was a volunteer organization, share it with some of the volunteers that maybe were calling and wondering why I wasn't fulfilling the role of secretary a little bit better. So, you know, but it started with me deciding, here's what my boundaries were going to be. Maybe for some spouses, they didn't mind, you know, being kind of
Well,
that.
that's so funny, Nancy, because when I'm just so, you know, like a kind of a challenging, right? And then my fiance said, you know what, would you like me to be your secretary so people have to go through me to get you?
Whoa,
That's so
that would have
funny.
been awesome, right?
And he will reject everyone. Oh gosh. Thank you so much, Nancy.
So Nancy, let me push you a little bit.
Okay.
In that same situation. So I might look at it. So let's say I'm one of those those people who call in, you know, to your husband during the volunteer thing, is I might think you should, you know,
Mhm.
like, well, she should be nice. She should be responsive, right? I mean, we're doing hard work here. This is like, I'm not getting paid for this, right? And he
Right.
took on this responsibility, right?
Right.
And she's there. I don't understand it. Why can't she just be nicer and just like take my frickin' phone call, or, you
Oh,
know, like know his schedule, or,
yeah.
you know, like, well, why is she not around?
Wow.
Right.
Um,
So I had to practice in my head polite, respectful answers, right? Like, oh, you know, I'm happy to take a message for you. And he will, as you know, he'll get it as soon as he gets home. Because that was the best I could do then. I didn't have eventually he got a bag phone. Do you remember those? So then I could refer them to that number. But for a while, and I had 3 small little children at home and my own job. So
wait a minute. You had your own needs?
right. No kidding.
What?
And I was also the volunteer secretary. You know, I tried to point that out to them as well. I get that, you know. I'm also a volunteer in this role. Only it's I'm married to the guy, so I can anyway, yeah, all those kinds of questions. And I could vent with Dave. I could say to him, listen, they're paying you. They're not paying me to be your secretary. I will treat them as politely as I would any caller to our home, you know, and take a message and do what I could.
Yep. So
That-
you were doing what you could with
Yep.
what you had while
Yep.
being respectful to your own needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's just take a moment here to welcome Ellen Hafner. Hello, Ellen.
Hi,
friends.
Ellen.
Hi, friends. Hi, friends. Sorry I'm late. I was taking a kid up to the cities to get some cross-country spikes. So I'm
Aha.
here now.
We,
What are we talking about? What have I missed?
we're talking
Boundaries.
about boundaries.
Oh, well, did you tell
Um,
them that you're speaking at a conference coming up about that?
I know, I told them that I am blatantly using their thoughts and perspectives to further inform me.
Yes.
But it was
Yes.
all Mary Kay's fault because she started it talking about asserting boundaries in her own life by, yes, turning down another job.
Yes. I'm proud of you, Mary Kay. I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
Something Nancy brought up really rang a bell in my head. We as women are acculturated. to be nice and to not get impatient when the same request has been made of us and we've explained patiently, no, that's not possible. It's, you know, it's tough to go against that grain, that expectation.
Yep. I agree with you, Sarah, that in some cases, and maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's more women of a certain age. I'll own that, you know, that, you know, that the socialization that, that girls were expected to be nice, not as, not outgoing. That's not the word I'm looking for, but not as, because I can remember I have 2 boys and a girl. And things that people wouldn't say about my sons, sometimes they would about my daughter, that she was being too, they would maybe use the word sassy, or like, no, she's speaking her mind. She's telling us what she needs or wants. And we didn't have those same, people didn't seem to respond to about the boys speaking up for what they needed or wanted in quite the same way. So I'm hoping that's changing. I don't know, that we're more accepting of girls being persistent and vocal and
Setting boundaries.
setting their own boundaries. Yeah, I hope it's improving. I don't know. What do the rest of you think?
Well,
I
actually,
go ahead,
go ahead.
Ellen.
Oh, this reminds me of a lesson plan that I do about the power of labels. And so I have parents share, like, what are some things that might slip out of your mouth when you're describing your child? Bossy, sassy, needy, dramatic. And then I have them go back through and I say, let's find a synonym for this that's in a positive light. So it comes out assertive, asks for what they need, is able to set boundaries, feels comfortable in their own body. So I think it's important information to let our families know, like, changing the messaging is really important for their kids. So their kids aren't, you know, bossy is such a negative connotation, but assertive is very positive. And you can't wish away the things that bother you now with kids, little ones, and wish for them to have it when they're teenagers. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
I think, I mean, we have moved away from, you know, labeling a child as bad or good, but those smaller, I say smaller labels are harder to eliminate from our vocabulary. But the other thing, I think it was Jane Goodall who was quoted as saying, anytime a woman asserts herself, she's considered difficult. That's why there are so many of us in the world. And that's something that's, you know, comes to mind. I mean, any woman who tries to make it in, like, what was considered the man's world of business and stuff like that. Oh, she's a ball buster. She's a whatever. It's like, no, she's doing exactly what you do, but she's being judged differently for it.
I just heard on a podcast, it says when men ask for what they want and, like, be in charge, they're called assertive. And when women do the same thing, they're called a bitch. Yeah. I mean, it's sad, but it's true. I heard it on an Enneagram podcast.
And it's never
Yeah,
a bad thing.
Ellen, I really liked your lesson plan about, you know, like say labeling, labeled children. I was looking for, I have a handout. It's really nice, you know, handout. So using the different words. You said like assertive, you know, instead of bossy, right? But I couldn't find it at this time. But I really liked this, you know, this. I mean, if you look at if I kind of I met many parents here. They would label the children, oh, she's really shy, or you know, he's this that, you know. It's really common. It's really common for parents to label their children, especially like the shyness.
Well, and also like smart. and sporty. Like those aren't good labels either,
Mhm.
or even cute. I mean, they're just not good.
Well, that is someone I need to pay attention. I like to say, "Oh, this is so cute." I wanna-
I mean, like I guess so. You're so pretty, you're so handsome, you know, because
Right.
then a child
yeah.
feels like if they don't look that certain way, then am I not pretty? Is
Yeah.
my worth only built
Yeah.
on the way I look? You know,
Yeah.
so it's not to say you can't say you look so pretty in that dress or you look so handsome with your hair. We just have to be careful that it's not, you know what I mean? Yeah.
What do we praise, right? What do we
Right.
want? Well, so the thing is like cute, being cute. Like, do you have some suggestions? To like when I really want to say cute. So, do you have suggestion to replace that?
What if you
Well, I
say,
think oh, go ahead, Mary.
what if you say heartwarming?
Heartwarming?
Mm.
Oh, huh.
Or in-
I'm
Well, I
reading
think
out.
you can say cute, but also say something else about their personality. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
you're so cute, and then make sure you follow it up with, oh, you're a good friend today. You're friendly. Or that was helpful. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it's just important not always be pointing
Okay.
out. Because I have a mom whose little girl has red hair, and she's like, yeah, she's got red hair. But everyone's like, what a cute redhead. What a cute redhead. And so she always walks away from those interactions saying, you're also a very kind sister and you're a good friend, because she doesn't want strangers all the day to just say, all people see is that she's a cute redhead and she's just tired of it. So
Wow.
As somebody who grew up, I was the smart one or the sweet one, and my sister was the pretty one. And that didn't do anything for my ego, but I imagine it also did not help my sister, because it's like, well, I have other good qualities. I'm not just pretty. And what happens when I hit middle age and maybe I'm not as pretty as I was? Am I no longer valuable and stuff like that? So it's something that I've always been trying to model for my nieces and for the families that I work with.
Wow. These are great information. Thank you.
Could I offer one more synonym, sort of maybe? And it's not one we always use, but what about how engaging? Because that's really often what cute means. You have really
Oh,
engaged.
engaging.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I never thought of that, Mary Kay. Wow.
Sometimes, do any of you ever worry that sometimes we've gotten so that we just, I freeze sometimes trying to make sure I'm saying the right word, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
That it's almost, I don't know. But in today's world, if we say
paralyzing.
yes,
Yeah,
paralyzing.
I know. Yeah. Like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have said that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear. I feel that. I feel that, Nancy.
And so
I
then
do.
sometimes I have a brief little, I'll ask parents about that when it looks like they're feeling that stress. Oh no, I shouldn't have used that word, or I shouldn't have described it that way. And I say, isn't this an example of all of us make mistakes? Or we have regrets about something we said, and how we handle that might be a good message also to our kids, oh, well, if I could say that over again, I might say that a little differently or whatever. I don't know. Sometimes because if we assume best intent ourselves about others, sometimes I think that's a good boundary for me to remember to assume best intent unless I find out otherwise.
I think
Nancy, yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
no, it's okay. Go ahead, Eugene. I'm gonna pull up a quote that I found the other day.
Yeah, so like think about like we only learned this later on, right? We didn't learn this when we were a child, right? So our brain shaped in a way, and so sometimes it's just like that we go back automatically, and it's not with what we want. It just happened automatically. Even Carol Dweck, right? In her book, she said there's something she came back home and her husband told really good news. It did, he did something really they were looking forward to it, and she said, "Good job." Right? And then they all laughed. So, like, well, we're all humans, right?
Yes,
So,
right.
yeah. So we parent educator, we are just so obsessed sometimes.
Yeah, it's good to know that even the experts sometimes have those same moments.
So I just put in the chat, a Brene Brown quote. I'm having trouble. It's nothing earth shattering, right? It's just, I am going to put this up in my room and I'm going to put it on big print. And I think I'm just going
Yeah.
to stick it on my wall because I think it creates the boundary, like, it helps remove judgment, right? It's good for me because I want them to know that I'm assuming the best for them. I want them to assume the best of me, and I want them to assume the best from each other.
Mhm.
And so I think I'm gonna print this. I'm gonna make it pretty and print it, maybe even frame it. Because I read it and I think I've read it before. I know Brene Brown, everything she says
Yeah.
is amazing, but I think, yeah, I'll read it really quick for anybody who's watching this. All I know is that my life is better when I assume that people are doing their best. It keeps me out of judgment and lets me focus on what is and not what should or could be. So, and I think that's a really nice boundary setting quote that can kind of encompass a lot of different things. So that's and I'm also going to do a little quote of Ted Lasso saying, "Be curious, not judgmental."
And I'll just bring this back to ourselves. So the only word I would change in that quote from Brene Brown, or I would add, is all I know is that my life is better when I assume that I am doing my best. It keeps me out of judgment and lets me focus on what
That's
is
awesome, Suzanne.
and what could be.
We
Because
definitely need to give grace to ourselves.
right. I mean, our
sure.
whole conversation about boundaries, right? Whether it's our entering into topics that, in my parallel with Sarah about, we're giving, and I've done this my entire career, right? Is we switch pronouns and we're much more anyway, I mean, just where we do what we do, and then sometimes we realize we need to change. We need to have said it differently. We need to have been more compassionate or been whatever, right? But we were doing it with our best intent, and then we learned, right? We drove at 42 and we got nailed by the cop, right? So we reel it back and we find a different route if we're going to drive fast, and so a lot of this learning, or Mary Kay taking another job and then going, I can't do this. I'm robbing my time from my family, or Nancy, being overly helpful with the volunteers and going, but I've got 3 little ones at home, and is just that sort of, it starts, I think a lot of this starts with ourselves, because then Sarah Alcock, when you were talking about, and this is, I think, a key, and this is the message too, I think that we share with families is we know what the limits are, but when it's up, or what the rules are, but when it's on us to impose them, like that's hard, like that's daunting, and that sucks sometimes, and because we don't want to be the heavies, but or like with kids and around discipline, like we don't want to be the heavy and tell the kid that they have a 10 o'clock curfew when all their friends are staying out until midnight, but what is it inside of us that helps us hold on to, but that 10 o'clock curfew is something I'm maintaining, or that not talking about religion, or selling, what were they selling? Mary Kay?
Mary Kay.
Yeah, they were, or a member not selling Mary Kay to other people. Like what, so this is my question then, what makes it, what drives us, or what reminds us that we have the strength, or it's okay for us to be the one to set that limit.
Thank you so much, everyone. I have to go. I have a meeting, and hope see you next week. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Bye,
Susan.
Eugene.
Bye, Eugene.
Bye.
So what is it? I mean, I'm curious, Mary Kay, you don't have to raise your hand.
One of the things is, for me, it's about setting the boundary and then watching who gets the short part. And is that okay with me? I mean, is it me losing sleep? Is it not seeing my family? Is it someone feeling bad in a group? Where does it kind of the rubber hit the road? And is that an outcome I'm okay with?
Mhm. So who is being disadvantaged by,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think the intent is ever disadvantaging, but who seems to bear the toughest impact from it?
right?
So when I read that whatever Dr. Becky Kennedy's like Good Inside book, which I want to book study this year. That's one of the chapters is talking about that and like resonating with the question, how do how do you feel about this when you say when your needs are going to make other people uncomfortable?
Mhm.
And I think that's a huge boundary thing,
Mhm.
like you guys were talking about when we talk about being females and just being conditioned to put other people's needs above our own. And then if it makes other people uncomfortable, or if it puts another person in, for us to meet our needs, it should never be where another person is uncomfortable or put out because of that. And that's not right. It isn't right. It isn't right. Your needs are just as valuable and just as important as anyone else's. And I think that's such an important lesson to parents. Like to me, boundaries is honestly kindness and respect.
Mhm.
By putting boundaries, I am being kind to not only myself, but everyone who else is in my group or in that relationship with me. Because if you are putting clear boundaries, that expectation is there, whether it is your child or whether it is a coworker or people that, or somebody that like for me, employees is something I'm really working on, is that if I set that boundary right now, that's actually kind. It's actually kindness to have that clear boundary. And I think it's really important in our parent ed classes to start out with those norms, with those clear boundaries immediately because of that. Right? Because of that. And get over the fact that sometimes it is going to make somebody feel uncomfortable to not be able to bring her Mary Kay into class and be able to say, hey, that's for another time. You can find another spot. I also work a lot with my families on things like that, or like people will talk about religion or those types of things. And I try as a resource because I'm a resource for them, right? Hey, I know there's a MOPS group that meets here. If you want to do parenting and talk religion at the same time, that's a great group for you to be part of. So it's not that I'm just like, putting a wall. A boundary is not a wall. I'm still a resource for that, but this isn't the time or place for that, but maybe here is. So I'm still being that resource. But I think that really resonated with me for the fact, because that's so hard for me. If I feel that my own needs is making somebody else feel uncomfortable or putting them out, I very much will sacrifice whatever it is that I was doing and be like, yep, of course I will fix this for you at 11 o'clock at night, because I don't want you to be sad.
I put in the chat, Sarah, it reminded me, because I think I pulled this off of one of her podcasts, but when we set a boundary and feel guilty, it's really about our kids' disappointments. Allow it, but don't let their disappointment burrow into you.
Yeah.
So,
and that's like for humans. Like, I feel like that's just that's not even kids. It's just human thing. Like
humans,
we have to let go of that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And I think the other thing too, it's important. A lot of people around us don't have boundaries. So I don't know if
Right.
we talk about that, like, and I've mentioned before too, and Susan, maybe this is something you can talk about, like, I had a teacher who thought about work constantly. She had no children at home, no spouse at home, and she thought about work all the damn time. And she would text me on a Saturday and be like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I will talk to you about this tomorrow. I'm not
Mhm.
thinking about work today. This was in COVID too. This was 2020 and 2021. When I was not at work, I did not want to do anything that required me to think about work. And so making sure that you can do that. And I also have a coworker who kind of makes negative comments, and I'm going to set a boundary and say, I don't think we should be making comments about parents being weird or quirky when we've spent 45 minutes with them. And that's what Ted Lasso. Let's be curious, not judgmental. So
Mhm.
not only do we have to have our own boundaries, but we also have to create safe places for ourselves when other people seem to lack them themselves. Do you know what I mean? So there's not only do we have to do our own work, but sometimes we have to do the work of other people because they don't have it,
Mhm.
So that's a piece too.
Yep.
So,
That's a
so
piece too.
how do you help that coworker? They've obviously got different needs, right? If they feel like they need to say those kinds of things about the parents they've just spent 45 minutes with, what is their need and how can you point them to where they might get that met? I don't know. I don't know the answer
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah. She's just kind of judgy, she just makes very, very quick snap judgments and decisions. And it really bugs me,
So it's her way of
so I
feeling
don't
better
know.
about herself. It's
Yeah, she doesn't seem to have low self-esteem, so I'm not quite sure. I don't know where it comes from. It's been 2 years. I'm trying to figure it out. I just want the comments to stop.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just, it's
I-
not, that's that. And ECFE is not where she's been. She's been in preschool, so she hasn't been with parents as much.
Oh.
Yeah.
But
She's talking about her preschool parents that same way.
she might have been, yeah,
That's been my experience with colleagues
yeah,
who tend to be
yeah,
that way. And
yeah,
it breaks my heart. It just breaks my heart. Not just
yeah,
preschool teachers,
So
but
I just say, I just keep talking like in my person because the only thing that I can
Mhm.
control is me.
Right.
Do you know
Right,
what I
correct.
mean? And
Yep.
like you're saying, like you're saying, Ellen, like then when she says those things, I'm saying, yeah, I'm really trying to keep like that type of negativity out of my brain. Like,
Yeah,
so
I like that.
I just throw
Love
it back.
that.
I just
Oh, I
I
love
just
that.
throw it back at me. So it's still all about me.
Me,
Mhm.
You
right.
know, it
Oh, I
is
love
because
that,
I'm the
Sarah.
only
Yeah.
one.
Mhm.
I just say, yeah,
Yep.
I'm really working to keep that negativity out of my brain and see, well, like we said, that positive intent,
Yep.
right? Like, yep, that parent did that. Keep thinking, keep that negative, and I always try to flip
Wasn't
it
great.
into positive intent,
Yep.
and then walk away from her.
And that's what we are, right? We are growth mindset people. We are looking for those strengths. We're
yeah.
strength based,
Mhm.
yeah. And I know that doesn't come easily to everyone,
Yeah.
she's had some tough stuff in her life the last year.
Yeah.
But I think we can help people create those boundaries too. So, but
Yeah.
that's another piece of it too. It's like you can have your own, but other people
Yeah.
don't have a clue,
Well,
so we
and
have to help them. So,
Sarah Fritsch, I like the way you said that because you're saying it in a way that doesn't sound like you're judging her or the colleague. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yeah,
It's
I love
saying,
that.
here's what I'm finding is helpful to me,
Mhm.
Yep.
in a way that doesn't make them feel judged.
Mhm.
Right. Because
Nobody
there's
needs
no question. We get some interesting families, right? And you're like, wow, where have they been? But that's the question. It's like, I had a, what time is it? It's time to go. Oh gosh, it's
Yeah.
1:07. Anyway, yeah, another time, another story for another day. So
Because you've got a million of them. Yes, it's so refreshing. Actually, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have you back, Ellen, um, for everything that you bring to the table. And so what a great conversation, everybody. I think we could probably talk about this every week, but we won't because we've got so many other things. And we didn't even get to Sarah Alcock's question about So her question was about attracting people to a topic, specifically in this case about reflective dialogue. And I think it's a good question regardless of what the topic is, because sort of a common theme we've often had has been around marketing and attracting people to, and then also part of her question too was sort of crossing district boundaries and offering something that parents in another district might be interested in. And I don't even think that just sounds like a dumpster fire as far as I'm concerned when we go across jurisdiction. But anyway, but we'll wrap it up for now. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you'll all be back next week. And Mary Kay, when you have the opportunity to answer my retreat questions, please do that. So yeah, I think that's wrapping this up for the week. Yeah. Okay.
Bye, friends. Oh, hi, Bobby.
And there's
Oh,
Luna.
no.
Hi, Luna. And this is the little urn
Hi.
lock that I got
Hi.
for Audrey. Yeah.
Oh, let me see.
Oh,
Oh,
it's yep, there it is. Yep,
cool.
and I put her fur,
Cool.
her fur in it.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Oh, here, I'll show you Sashi before we leave. There she is.
Oh, honey.
She's just hanging out, listening to our conversation. Like, gosh, these ladies are smart. So smart.
We put her to sleep.
That's what she, yeah, she does a lot of that, She's like 12. That's what she does. Anyway. It was so
Mary
lovely
Kay.
to see you ladies.
Mary Kay, it's at Menafee. It will be recorded.